Before I begin, I wanted to share a little bit about my background and experience with online teaching. I've been teaching here at Hofstra since 2017, but I've taught online classes since 2014. I was also part of a research team that examined, among other things, how technology is used in developmental education at colleges and universities across the United States. And part of that research examined the challenges that institutions faced when they integrated technology into developmental education. So today's webinar is based not only on my own experience as an online teacher, but also on research and scholarly literature regarding online teaching and learning. Now, my experience and research has been in higher education, but much of what I'm going to be talking about today applies to K through 12 education as well. Online teaching in K through 12 education, which a lot of teachers and students are experiencing right now. Also, in recognition that technology is always changing, and some of the people who are attending this webinar today have their own experiences that they might like to share, there will be some time at the end of my presentation. So if somebody would like to share their own experiences or advice, just put a note into the chat and we'll ask you to unmute yourself and share. So without further ado, first let's go over some basics. When we talk about remote teaching or online teaching, what are we talking about? There are a couple of different ways that that course material can be presented to students online. First, the course might be synchronous, which means that you and your students are meeting at the same time, but not in the same place. You'll be meeting over the internet. So for example, in a Zoom room, such as the way we are meeting right now, or another video conference. Second, the course might be asynchronous. That is, you and your students are meeting not at the same time and not at the same place. So you'll still be over the internet. And instead of meeting in real time, you as the instructor would post materials to the internet, such as lessons, videos, or other online activities to give your students a certain time frame in which to complete the task. Also, there's several different ways that you can communicate with your students remotely. When we talk about distance learning or remote education, we're often talking about using the internet as a medium. So you can use the internet to communicate with your students via email, video conference, discussion forums, chat rooms, posting videos and screencasts, and even using a Zoom room for some real-time conferencing. But if you have students who don't have a reliable internet connection or who would prefer not to communicate on the internet, you can communicate with them by telephone or text message. And I mention that because even though the fact that you are able to reach students by phone or text may seem obvious, when you think about online teaching, it's often easy to overlook some of the more traditional ways of contacting people remotely. And sometimes an individual phone call, a conversation with the student can really make a difference. There are different options available for learning management systems and video conferencing software. And you can see some examples of brands on this slide. A learning management system, sometimes called an LMS, is basically the technology that houses your online course. It maintains and organizes your course content. You can upload course materials to the LMS. You can send a blast email to your students. Students can submit their assignments on the LMS, and you can grade assignments using the LMS. And examples of brands, as you can see right here, include Blackboard, Canvas, Moodle, and Google Classroom. There's also the option of using video conferencing, particularly if you are providing synchronous online teaching. So video conferencing like Zoom and also Google Meet are some popular brands. Even if your online course is asynchronous, video conferencing technology can be useful to pre-record and edit videos that you can then upload to your learning management system, or to hold virtual office hours or other meetings with students. You also have a number of options with regard to the mechanisms through which you will provide course content to your students. So this slide lists some examples, although there are other options as well. Voice over PowerPoint presentations, where you have a PowerPoint slideshow like this one and provide a discussion over each slide. VoiceThread, which can be similar to a voice over PowerPoint, but it can also include videos, images, and other media, and your students can post or record their own comments on the VoiceThread, so it can become like a conversation. You can record a video or audio of yourself providing a lecture. So videos can be taken at different locations that are maybe relevant to the subject matter that you're teaching. There are also instructors who will take a video of themselves in front of a smartboard so that they can use that as part of their video lecture. Videos of the instructor are also useful in online classes because they can help students feel the instructor's presence in the class. So even if it's just you talking to your video camera and you don't have a special location or any other features, that can go a long way towards students really feeling your presence in the online course. Screen capture videos, these are video recordings of your computer screen. You can do a demonstration of your computer screen and explain what you're doing, and then the students can watch a video of it. Screencast-O-Matic is a popular brand to use for screen capture videos. There are also a lot of opportunities to link to short, useful videos on YouTube or other video sharing websites. Some learning management systems allow you to embed YouTube videos right into your online course portal, which is also useful. Open educational resources. This refers to teaching resources that are available for free over the internet. They're not bound by copyright because they're either part of the public domain or have a license that makes them freely available. These include reading materials, videos, instructional software, curriculum plans, and many other types of educational resources. And finally, discussion boards or blogs are forums in which the instructor and students can write comments and questions back and forth to each other and engage in a dialogue, and you can ask students to respond to each other's comments as well. Now, there are a number of concerns that teachers and school leaders have had with remote teaching. One concern is, how effective is online teaching? Are students going to be able to learn as effectively in an online classroom as they are in a face-to-face classroom? And related to the concern of effectiveness is the concern about quality. What is the quality of remote instruction? Will the learning standards and expectations be the same for an online course as it is for a face-to-face course? Another concern is engagement of students. Will faculty be able to engage students effectively in an online class? Are students more likely to tune out or less likely to participate actively in an online class? This may be particularly a concern for an asynchronous online class where students and the instructor are not meeting all at the same time. The costs of remote instruction are also a concern. Schools need to have an infrastructure in place to support online learning, including sufficient licenses for learning management and video conferencing software, sufficient training and technical support, sufficient computing resources, and resources to protect against computer viruses and malware. There are also costs for students to participate in online learning. These include access to the technology that they will need to access the online class, including a computer, software, and internet access. The costs for students are in addition to what they're going to pay for tuition and fees and books and the other costs of attending. So for low-income students, the additional costs associated with online learning can make the programs cost prohibitive. And closely related to the issue of costs is the issue of equity. So again, low-income students, students who do not have internet access, and some students with disabilities have more difficulty accessing and participating in online classes. Some additional concerns about remote teaching include whether the technology is user-friendly. That is, that the technology will be relatively easy for new users to learn, and that students and instructors will be able to use the technology without too much difficulty. Related to that, there is also a need for training new users in the technology. This can be expensive and time-consuming. When training on new educational technology is not available, or as is often the case when it's available for faculty and staff but not for students, this can lead to lost time and users trying to figure out the technology for themselves, and can also result in technical difficulties or not being able to take full advantage of what the technology offers. Another concern with online teaching is time management. So in addition to learning the technology, online teaching involves a great deal of reading and writing, because the main mode of communication in an online course is text-based. There's a lot of writing back and forth and reading the comments, reading emails and writing emails. So therefore, teaching and learning online can be very time-consuming, and good time management skills are imperative. And another concern about remote teaching is attrition. That is, the concern that students will more easily drop out of an online class than a face-to-face class. And this concern is well-founded because some research has shown that students are more likely to drop out of online courses than face-to-face courses. So research, including my own team's research, has found that schools and colleges have faced certain challenges when transitioning to online teaching and otherwise implementing educational technologies. These challenges include a lack of funding or resources to keep the technology up to date and to build the infrastructure to effectively use the technology. And as I discussed on the previous slide, lack of funding and resources can occur on the student side as well. Insufficient training of both teachers and students in how to use technology effectively has been another challenge. Related to the challenge of insufficient training is the issue of end user difficulties. So that refers to difficulties that both students and instructors have when using the technology. When teachers don't have sufficient technological skills, it will be difficult for them to assist their students with using the technology. Inaccessibility is another challenge, and this refers not just to being unable to access the internet or the necessary computer hardware and software, but also to temporary inaccessibility caused by things like internet or power outages or loss of access codes. And another important component of accessibility is that the online course must be fully accessible by students with disabilities. So for example, a student who is hearing impaired may require the use of captions for video lectures, or a student with a learning disability may need a screen reader or some other accommodation. Making your online course accessible to students with disabilities is not only a good practice, but it's also required by law. Technical difficulties present another challenge, and it's almost inevitable that in an online course, students or the instructor will at some point encounter technical difficulties. Sadly, another challenge faced by schools that have transitioned to online learning is hacking, which occurs when someone intrudes on an online course to steal information or disrupt the session. Something called Zoom bombing has been in the news recently, and that's when someone enters a Zoom session in order to disrupt it. And finally, a transition to online learning can feel impersonal. The removal of in-person and real-time interactions with the instructor and with their classmates can be difficult for some students. One respondent in my research team study of the use of technology in developmental education was a college leader who said that some students in their institution were less likely to ask questions of the instructor outside of a face-to-face context. So now let's turn to some strategies on how you can enhance engagement with your students in an online course. Research has shown that when instructors build rapport with students in their online courses, students are more engaged and more likely to be successful in and satisfied with the online course. Increased rapport adds to students' perception that the instructor is present, which is important for student engagement and satisfaction. So here are some ways that faculty can build rapport with students in an online course. First, provide short videos of yourself for your students to view. These don't need to be very long, and you can use videos to introduce a new unit or a new concept throughout the course. You can also use videos to respond to frequently asked questions. And it's also better if these videos were relatively brief and posted regularly throughout the course rather than just at the very beginning or the very end of the term. Another strategy to build rapport with your students is to contact them via email on an individualized basis. So one thing I do in my online courses is to send an email to each student to their individual email address, addressing them by name. So not an email blast to the whole class, but to individual students a couple weeks into the class and then a few weeks again after that, just to check in and see how they're doing, see if they have any questions and if they're understanding the material so far. The students seem to really appreciate the individualized contact, and that's because, first of all, they're not often expecting it, but also because the asynchronous online courses can seem impersonal. So this is adding a personal touch to an asynchronous online course. Another strategy is to provide timely, detailed, and student-specific feedback on assignments. So again, this goes toward adding personalization to the online learning experience. Feedback that is specific to students' individual strengths and areas for improvement, and that is provided in a timely fashion, will not only be appreciated by the students and enhance the instructor's presence in an online class, but would also be geared toward helping them to progress through the course at a good pace and to improve their work based on your feedback. Even in an asynchronous online course, it is worth trying to find times when you can arrange for synchronous meetings, such as by offering regular synchronous office hours via Zoom or another video conference, or an end of the term celebration hour to mark the end of the semester. Also, never underestimate, again, the impact that an individual telephone call can have to address student questions or concerns. And finally, another way to build rapport with students is to be humorous occasionally in presenting course materials or lectures when possible and appropriate to do so. Another way to enhance student engagement in an online class is to structure the class so as to encourage student interactions with the instructor and with other students. Research has shown that student interactions with other students, with the instructor, and with the course materials can enhance student learning of the subject matter and also have the students feel more engaged in your course. These interactions can also keep students satisfied with your course and keep them thinking about your course materials. Here are some suggestions and ideas for how to encourage student interaction in an online course. First, include assignments that enable students to work collaboratively, such as a group project. One way to do this is to use shared drives, such as Google Drive, to enable students to create documents or portfolios or presentations collaboratively. Requiring students to interact on discussion forums or blogs by posting initial content and questions and asking students to respond to your post as well as to other students' comments and blog posts or discussion board posts can also initiate interesting and interactive dialogues. When conducting a synchronous class session, you can ask students to deliberate in small groups. Zoom has a feature for breakout rooms that is useful to enable and to facilitate that small group discussion. Here are some additional strategies to enhance engagement in your online course. First, use multiple forms of media and technology so that you don't rely too heavily on just one form. So for example, in addition to voice threads or a voiceover PowerPoint presentation, consider also linking to YouTube videos, posting a video of yourself, and using discussion boards or blogs. Also consider sharing your screen so that students can see the instructor's screen's perspective on their own computer. This is useful when you're trying to do a demonstration on your screen, for example, about how a particular type of software works. In synchronous classes, Zoom's screen share feature, which we are using right now, works quite well. And for asynchronous courses, an application like Screencast-O-Matic will let you record a video of your screen that you can post to your online course for students to view at their convenience. Again, regularly reach out to students to check in with them, see if they have any questions or concerns in the course. And it's important to be proactive about that. So don't wait for the students to come to you before you reach out to them. It can also be useful, depending on your course topic, to make connections between your course content and current events or something that's happening in popular culture. Studies have shown that students are more engaged and learn better when their instructors can make a connection between the course materials and something students already have an independent interest in. I teach courses in educational leadership and policy, and there are often a number of issues regarding education and higher education in the news. So I find it pretty easy to draw connections between my courses and certain current events. And when that happens, I will create a short announcement that I'll post to Blackboard and send as an email blast, or post something on a discussion board and ask for comments about it. And I will also sometimes bring them up on my online lectures. Finally, let's turn to some strategies that can help to address some of the challenges that schools may run into when transitioning to online learning. This slide shows a list of strategies that are useful for both instructors and students, and they include getting training in the educational technology that you're using. Training might be offered by your school or by the vendor of the technology. There are also often instructional videos for particular educational technologies that are available on YouTube or on the vendor's website. Learning how to use the technology can help you and your students get the most out of that technology for the learning experience, and can also help you to avoid technical difficulties or unexpected problems, which is related to the second point on this slide. Anticipate common technical difficulties and test your technology for problems. For example, it can be useful to do a test run of the technology before your class begins to see if you run into any problems. You can also speak to colleagues who have had previous experience with a particular type of technology to share their experiences with you, including whether they encountered any problems with the technology, so that you can have an idea of what to expect. It's also important to know how you can contact your school's technical support services so that if you run into any problems with the technology, you'll be able to get the problem addressed promptly. And good time management skills are essential to being successful in online teaching and learning, both for instructors and for students. This is especially true for students in an asynchronous online course, where students work at their own pace through a variety of modules, and students are often given a range of days to complete their work. It can be tempting to procrastinate in such situations, especially with other urgent matters competing for students' time, as is what is happening now. And studies have shown that students with better time management skills tend to perform better in their academics. But time management in an online course is essential for faculty as well. Because again, the methods of communicating with your students are so often text-based, so that involves a lot of reading and writing. And again, when faculty have other pressing matters that are competing for their time, it can be tempting to put off an asynchronous online course. So practicing time management skills and having time management strategies, allowing extra time in your schedule to tend to your course preparation and online teaching is very, very important. Here are some additional strategies for addressing challenges that may arise in your online course. Remember that not all students have reliable access to the internet, even if they have sufficient access to complete their work for the online course and the course requirements. They may not have access to the technology at other times. Also, some students just prefer speaking with their instructor by phone, or some prefer a synchronous video conference, while others might prefer email. So it's important to be open to using multiple methods for communicating with your students. You can also help students to find resources that may be useful for them. So this includes the use of open educational resources, which are again, open license, internet accessible resources that are free to use in your course. But it may also include helping low-income students who don't have internet access to locate organizations that are providing free or low-cost internet access. Currently, I've heard of multiple programs that are providing internet access for low-income families right now, so that students can access their classes and other school resources that are currently being provided online. You can also inform students about the availability of access services for students with disabilities, which is related to the next point on this slide, which is that it's important to work with your school's disability access services to ensure that your online course is fully accessible for students with disabilities. Finally, you might be thinking at this point, all of this seems like a lot of work and that it will take a lot of time, and that is absolutely correct. Teaching online does take a lot of preparation and a lot of work. And in fact, there is research showing that instructors of online courses spend more time on average in their teaching and their prep work than instructors of face-to-face courses. So making sure to dedicate a lot of time to your online course is essential. But the time you invest in developing and teaching your online class can pay off when you are rewarded with highly engaged students who learn a lot from your course. This slide has links to some resources that instructors of online courses might find useful. This includes information about resources for online teaching, open educational resources, and some discussions of best practices. EDUCAUSE is a great resource for more information about educational technology. Merlot is a well-curated database with a lot of useful open educational resources. And professional associations such as the National Council of Teachers of English and the Association of College and University Educators, as well as some others, often have resources and advice for online teaching on their websites. Again, this PowerPoint is going to be emailed to registrants of this webinar, so you will have access to the information and the links to the resources that appear on this slide. And I also have a list of the references that I've used in putting together my presentation, which you will also have access to once you receive the PowerPoint. Finally, I wanted to end my presentation by thanking you for attending this webinar. I hope you have found it useful so far. And at this point, I would like to see if there are any questions or comments. And also, since some of you are likely to have additional advice or experiences or information about how to engage students and anticipate challenges in an online classroom, we would love to hear from you. So just indicate in the chat that you have something you would like to share. And when we get to your comment, we will ask you to unmute yourself. So at this point, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and we will take a look at some of the questions. Brittany, do you have?
I do. So the first question that I have is from Professor Messina, and I'm just going down in order from the oldest to the newest. So if you don't hear your question just yet, don't panic. Professor Messina asked, what is your recommendation for using multiple polls in Zoom?
Oh, so that's another, I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's another way that you can engage students in online classes. If you are able to work the polls in Zoom, I have not used it as a teacher, but I've been a participant in Zoom meetings where the polls were used. And I think that's an excellent way that you can take the temperature of your students. Previously, people have used the things called clickers and other various ways to figure out what students are thinking and if they're learning things in your classroom in real time. And I think the polls are an excellent way to sort of translate that into an online environment. But again, as with other technology, it's important to do a test run and learn how to use it so that it can be used effectively in the classroom. But yes, that's an excellent idea.
Okay, next question is also from Professor Messina. What is the best way to video myself outside for a lab and then uploading it to Blackboard or another platform?
That's a good question. I tend to think the most user-friendly technology is always the best. And so something that you already have available to you, something that you can obviously carry with you outside. And so if you have a smartphone that has a video capability of it, there have been times that I've taught on online courses, and I basically it's me talking to my smartphone making a video. You can get software on how video editing software. I used to use Movie Maker, which came with my Microsoft, to just edit it and make sure that it flowed well and I didn't have any extra time added on before or after. I would then save it to my hard drive, log into my Blackboard, and upload it into whatever module I was using for that particular unit. So that the easiest way, I think, is always the best. If you have access to more sophisticated software where you can put some bells and whistles in there, then by all means use that as well. But I find that a smartphone video works just fine, especially if you're going to be outside.
Okay, next question is from Craig. Regarding students with disabilities, I worry in particular about remote teaching and students with hearing impairment. What are best practices? I know you just mentioned captioning, but is that possible in a synchronous Zoom meeting?
You know, that's a great question, and I recently learned that there is a function in PowerPoint that can actually caption what you're saying in real time. And the way I learned this was I had a student giving a presentation using PowerPoint in one of my synchronous Zoom classes. And there was a caption that was recording everything that she said. So I think I haven't had a chance to look into how that works yet, but it was built right into her PowerPoint. I don't know if it's an add-on or what, but I think that would be an easy way to do it since you're already using screen share and possibly PowerPoint in your class. Also, never hesitate to reach out to the Disability Access Services Department to ask questions just like this, because they're up to date on all of the latest technology that you can use for students with disabilities. I think that would be an excellent question to ask them as well.
Okay, this one is a tie-in to the last question, but this one's from Gail. I would also like to know how one makes sure that the materials are compliant. How do I make sure my PowerPoint slides are accessible to vision impaired students, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that one thing you can do is you can just do a little bit of research on the internet and see what other people, other instructors at institutions, at your institution and others have done to enhance their disability access services for students. And again, when in doubt, contact disability access services at your school or at your college or university and find out what they recommend that you do. And they might even take a look at your course and take a look at your materials before you post them, and give you some advice and recommendations for how to keep those accessible to students with disabilities. And they might also have advice for other disability accommodations that you hadn't thought of yet. So it's always great to be proactive and reach out to the Disability Access Services office.
Okay, the next one is from PHIJEB, and they asked about the data on effectiveness and quality. Can the best online class rival the best in-person class in all the accessible categories?
That's such a great question, and I don't think that there's a definite yes or no answer to that. I will say that there is research that students perform better in face-to-face classes, and again, I mentioned this in my slideshow today. Students are more likely to drop out of online classes, so that's not to say that that there isn't a way to improve online classes to enhance those student outcomes and to reduce student attrition rates. That's not to say that every face-to-face course experience is always going to be better than every online course experience. But it's just important to keep that information in mind and figure out ways that you can engage those students in your online class.
The next one's kind of a question/comment from Craig. He says, I'm finding that in synchronous Zoom classes, it is harder to assess how breakout groups are working since you can only listen in one more breakout room at a time.
Yes, I have found that same thing. Yeah, I think it would be useful to have a way that you can monitor online breakout rooms in Zoom, multiple breakout rooms in Zoom at a time. I'm trying to think about how that might work, because then you'd have sort of competing audio, and that might be difficult to figure out what's going on in one group versus another. But I agree, it's not ideal. However, I will say that when I teach my face-to-face classes and I have small group discussion and I'm sort of walking around the room trying to monitor those discussions, the same thing happens where I can only really focus on one small group at a time. So I don't think it's too different from what you encounter in a face-to-face class. But yeah, it's definitely a limitation.
Okay, next one is from Gary. I have tried to recreate the classroom atmosphere in Zoom, but very few students ever ask questions anymore, and 50% don't even turn on their cameras. Any suggestions on bringing some interaction back?
Yeah, that was one thing that I noticed as well when I started teaching my course this semester, which had always been a face-to-face course, and started teaching it as a synchronous Zoom course. And now that I've had several weeks of experience with it, I think if I had to go back and do anything differently, I would definitely make reminders for myself to pause every maybe one or two slides every few minutes or so, and stop and just sort of say any questions. And this happens sometimes in a face-to-face class too, where there's a silence. You pause and there's a silence in the room, and inevitably somebody will want to fill that silence. Another thing is to ask students to use the raise hand function, because when I'm teaching face-to-face and I'm looking at my students and I see somebody has a confused look on their face or they have their hand up, I can see that. You can't always see that when you're in a Zoom session. So, but sometimes when a student does put their hand up in a Zoom session, you get a little alert about that on your screen. So I would encourage students to use the raise hand function in addition to taking frequent pauses to see if there's any questions in the Zoom class.
Next question is from Sally. Is ed tech training available to students?
That's a really good question, and I think it would be dependent on your school or your organization. I don't know if we have any ed tech people in the audience today who might want to weigh in on that, but I think it's definitely worth asking your school's IT department to see what training is available to students. The other thing is, and I mentioned this in the slideshow, I've actually found some free training videos online, either on a vendor's website or on YouTube. So sometimes students can find training videos that way, and that can be useful as well.
Okay, next question is from Andrea. Can EdTech support us in making our online materials more accessible for hearing and sight impaired students?
So I would definitely contact EdTech, and again, I'm actually just seeing now that there is a note coming up in the chat saying that yes, Hofstra has a student help desk that can provide one-to-one support for students. So thank you, Carrie Crocco, for that. She also says regarding Andrew's question, even though I'm recording classes, very few students fail to show up. And in terms of finding out how EdTech or how IT can help you to make your online course accessible to students with disabilities, I would say definitely ask them if there's something that they can do for you. Maybe working in conjunction with the Disability Access Services Office, you can get a course set up so that it will help the students with disabilities to access your course.
Okay, next is from Greet. Do you know if being able to participate online in classes can help people who have social anxiety or if there are ways that online classes are more difficult for students who have social anxiety?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a great point because it is definitely been told to me by students who are more introverted and perhaps do have some social anxiety and they don't feel comfortable participating in a course, in a face-to-face course that has a lot of people in the room, are more comfortable with typing in a discussion board, for example, and having a back and forth conversation on an online blog or something of that nature. So yeah, I think even though there are some students who are learners who want that face-to-face personalized experience, there are other learners who can thrive in an online environment. And I think that's an excellent example, somebody who might have social anxiety and is more comfortable participating in the online environment.
Okay, next question is from Koopsta's family. How many students are recommended for an online class?
That's another great question. You definitely don't want the online class to get too large. And so in terms of best practices, I think that most online classes, when they get to about 20, 25, anything beyond that, and it's going to get to be too large, it gets very difficult to manage the discussions, and students' comments might seem to get drowned out. It's less likely that, it's more likely that a comment might get overlooked by an instructor when there's 30 or 40 different comments on a thread. So you would want to limit those online classes so that they don't get too large.
Next question is from Anna. How can we help students and families to develop time management?
Excellent question. I think that part of what you can do is share your own practices, what has worked for you. This would be a very good opportunity to post one of the personalized videos that you would of you speaking to your computer screen at the beginning of class. It has the added benefit of giving the instructor that presence in the online class, but also sharing some useful advice right at the outset of the course as to how you can manage your time. For example, you might want to set aside a certain amount of time on particular days every week and just put it in your calendar. I'm going to work on my online course at this time. Keep it like it's an appointment so that you are not tempted to push it off onto the back burner and do other things. So that's one strategy for it. And I would also recommend that students check with whatever resources their school or their college might have in terms of tutoring centers and advising centers and places like that that have additional resources and information about effective time management.
Okay, next question is from Simona. Is calling students individually to answer questions effective to engage students, or is it too intrusive?
So that's a good question. I find it to be effective, but I would be cautious there because you don't want to be too intrusive on a student who maybe doesn't want to give out their telephone number to their instructor. So what I would do is make clear that I'm available for individualized phone calls. And I find that most of the time the students are very amenable to that. If they have a question and they don't want to sort of post it on the message board in front of the whole class, they're happy to have a phone call with me. But I think you're right to be cautious about being too intrusive, and I wouldn't make it a requirement that students have to speak to you by phone, but definitely let them know that you're available if that's something that they're interested in.
Next question is from Lisa. Students have commented that the volume of work was not decreased and they feel overwhelmed. How can you maintain a rigorous course if it needs to be cut down a good bit?
Yeah, so that's an excellent point too. I think that sometimes, especially if somebody is new to teaching online courses, they're inclined to give a lot of additional work because they want to sort of make up for the fact that you're not in the classroom. And that can be a mistake because, again, the course content is what the course content is the course content, whether that's in a face-to-face or an online environment. So you don't want to overwhelm students by providing more work than you would in a face-to-face class. And you also want to take into account, again, that so much of an online course is reading and writing, and that takes additional time as well. So especially the first time you teach an online class, you might make errors like that. And I would say maybe just make adjustments so that the next time you teach a class, you say, you know what, it was a mistake to give this much work this time. I'm going to see what I can reduce. Another way is use your colleagues who have taught online courses in the past as a resource and ask them, tell them what you're thinking about doing and ask them for feedback. Do you think that sounds like too much, too little? You know, what are your thoughts about that?
This one's from Deborah. Is it true that only 6 people can attend a Google Hangout session at one time?
I don't know that is, I don't have information about that. If somebody from IT or EdTech wants to weigh in on the comments, please do. I was recently on a Google Meet for one of my kids' schools, and there were definitely more than 6 people on it. So I don't know if maybe Meet is sort of like the newer Google video conference function, but I'm not sure about that limitation on Hangout. So I don't know.
All right, next question is also from Lisa. Can students in breakout rooms be monitored?
Oh, that's a good question. So you can, as the instructor, you can sort of go into particular breakout rooms and monitor them that way by simply being present there. When there's a recording, because I know that Zoom automatically records things. I actually don't know if they record individual breakout rooms. I'm going to ask once again EdTech to possibly weigh in on this. And now I'm just seeing Carrie Crocco is responding to the previous question about Google Hangout. She says up to 150 people can participate in a Google Hangout, though video call is limited to 25 participants. So thank you, Carrie, for weighing in on that.
Next question is from Gary. I am concerned that posting the recorded Zoom class immediately after the class may prevent some students from feeling the need to attend synchronously.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, I plan to make them all available as a final exam study aid at the end of the semester. Thoughts?
Yeah, I've heard of that strategy as well, because obviously if you want real-time participation like you would have in a classroom, you want to encourage students to participate in the real time as opposed to waiting for the video afterwards. One thing that I do when I post my videos is I do it relatively soon after the class, because sometimes students just can't make it for whatever the reason, or they have an emergency maybe right now with, you know, everybody's kids are home or somebody had technical difficulties. So I do try to make it available relatively soon, but at the same time, you want to do what you can to encourage the students to attend the class. So I think that's sort of like an instructor by instructor, class by class decision.
Next question is from Abel. How do you deal with exams and quizzes?
Yes. So there are different functions and different learning management systems to how you can create exams. For example, in Blackboard, you can create exams using either multiple choice or short answer, and they have automatic grading, and then you can go in and look and to make sure that all of the short answer questions are corrected as well. And there's other ways you can use. You can use polls, you can use blogs for essays and things like that. I did see a question come by about integrity. How can you ensure that there's no cheating in an online class? And I think that you know, it's difficult to ensure that there's no cheating in any class. But one tool that some professors have found useful is Turnitin, which is a plagiarism detection software. I have also heard of newer softwares that have a way to identify the person who's taking the exam. I don't know a lot of the details about them, but I do know that they exist, and that's another way that some online instructors have been implementing that technology to try and enhance academic integrity and cut down on cheating.
Okay, next question is from Anna. What are the best methods to help students and parents learn the technology remotely if you can't use Zoom? So they say they cannot use Zoom.
Yeah. So to use I think the question is asking to use your course technology remotely if they're not able to log into Zoom, or is it to learn? Yeah, to learn your course material remotely if they can't log into Zoom. I would say that in those cases, definitely make use of whatever your learning management software is, so that you can put all of your course materials on there. You could put a recording of the Zoom lecture. You can put your reading materials. There, again, open educational resources. There's a lot of them out there that you can link to, YouTube videos, etc. Put them on that LMS so that students can have access to that when they log in. If students are not able to access the internet at all, then that gets a little bit more challenging. You can see if they have any way of receiving email and figure out if there's a way that you can connect them to a Google Drive or some sort of a shared drive where they can log in and quickly download it and save it and look at it at their own time. But it's a problem if people don't have access to the internet. Then this remote instruction becomes very, very difficult, which is why it's important to try to connect your students with whatever resources might be available to them.
Next question is from Barry. Do you require students to turn on video?
I don't require it. I have heard of a lot of students who are not comfortable with it for whatever the reason, and so while I do personally like to see my students' faces while I'm communicating with them on Zoom, I don't require it. I don't recommend that anybody require students who are not comfortable for whatever the reason for turning on the screen, on the video. And I do understand that comes with a cost, right? It does come with a little bit of a less present, less engaged feeling. But I think that is outweighed by making sure that the students feel comfortable in your class.
We have another one from Sandra. What do you think is the best way / resource to record short videos, and how can these be put into Blackboard, for instance, under assignments or documents? They said, thanks for all your efforts.
Oh, thank you. So I just do it the easiest way that I have, which is with my smartphone. I'll take a video of myself. Sometimes I'll use my webcam and take a video of myself and just edit it with whatever software comes with my computer, whether it's Movie Maker or some other sort of Microsoft editor. There are other people who are way more talented at video editing than I am, and I think they probably have a lot of really creative things that they can do with backgrounds and screens and editing and everything else. But yeah, I feel like the simplest technology is the best because you know how to use it. You'll be confident in using it. And as for uploading it, I find it easy to save it to my own computer hard drive, and then what I do with my online classes is I'll have different modules or different sort of unit folders, content folders in Blackboard, and I will just simply upload it there into the LMS.
Okay, next one is from Melissa. To use Turnitin, does your school district or institution have to have it?
Yes, I believe so. I don't think it's a freely available software. And Hofstra does have it. We do have a license for that.
All right, I believe I got through all the questions.
Okay, great, thank you. I want to say thank you so much to everybody who attended today. Again, you'll receive my PowerPoint slides, and you'll be able to access this video when it comes on YouTube. So if there are any more final questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, thank you so much for attending, and good luck with teaching your online class.